Hey, solopreneurs, quick note before this episode kicks off. This is part of the How to Grow Your Business series. I'm bringing in a whole bunch of experts between how to grow your business on LinkedIn to how to handle your team and make sure that you're managing your contractors the right way to really help you grow your business. I hope you enjoy these episodes and have a fantastic listen. Hey, solopreneurs, Gabe here. Today we have Bobby Klinck of BobbyKlinck.com, and he's going to talk to us about why we are not building brand equity, how to do it, and why it is so important for us solopreneurs to be focusing on our brand equity. It was a fantastic conversation, and I'm looking forward to you hearing it. Bobby, thank you for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Gabe. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Good. I'm really excited. The contact form that came about with you, and then our conversation about getting you on the podcast was why building brand equity is the most important thing we are not doing as solopreneurs, which is a little interesting to even like to hear. Well, I'm not building brand equity. Well, what the heck am I doing wrong? I mean that. And so it's going to be a great conversation. I'm excited about that. But as we always go through my podcast is I want to hear your story first. Where'd you come from? You've got a neat history that brings you to today that I think would be great for everybody to hear.
Well, the question is, how long do you want me to talk, Gabe? Because for listeners, I am a former trial lawyer, although trial lawyer is really kind of a misnomer because very few lawyers actually try a bunch of cases. But I'm a former litigator. I did civil litigation, and then I was a federal prosecutor for 3 years. Did that after graduating Harvard Law School, thought, hey, I'm going to be a lawyer. This is my career. This is what I'm doing the rest of my life. And that was the path I was on. And I like to say that I had a resume that would make just about any lawyer jealous. Coming out of law school, I got a clerkship, a prestigious 1-year gig working for a federal court of appeals judge in Little Rock, Arkansas, who he was probably one of the most respected liberal judges never to make it to the Supreme Court. President Clinton considered him twice for appointing him. Both times he had an appointment. Then I came to Washington, D.C., worked at premier law firms, including one where my mentor was a guy who I just called Neil. Now we would have to call him Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. So I've kind of had, some great mentors along the way. But back in 2010, when I was coming out of working as a federal prosecutor, I kind of veered off the standard path. And I could have gone back to the firm where I was. Very traditional thing where I would have had just, making good money, but I would have been living someone else's life. And so I joined a small startup law firm with 2 guys who had been around for about a year and a half at the time. Very entrepreneurial, a lot of plaintiff side work, a lot of just different things. And in doing that, though, I made one of the classic entrepreneurial mistakes. We didn't have a written agreement about what was going to happen long-term. And for most lawyers, that's not a big deal, right? Because you go to a law firm, you're getting paid on the regular, so no big deal. I mean, hey, I make partner, I don't, whatever. My problem was I had all the downside risk because we were a contingency fee firm quite often. So I would go 6-9 months sometimes without getting paid. And I had no guaranteed upside. And so my wife got pregnant in, what would that have been? 2013, I guess. And I raised the issue. I said, hey, we need to talk about formalizing a partnership agreement. Actually make me a partner. And we talked about it and then stopped talking because it wasn't going anywhere. And then talked about it some more. And when my daughter was 3 months old, I kind of knew it was over. Like we had this I'll never forget it. I was sitting in my basement. It was a snowy Sunday afternoon. We were having a conference call. I was holding my 3-month-old baby. And I knew at the end of that call, my time at that firm was over. Now, they weren't kicking me out, but I just knew I couldn't stay. And so I literally turned to my wife and brother-in-law who were here. I said, let's go to the office. I took all my stuff back and I picked up all my stuff from the office and I hung my shingle. And I hung my shingle knowing nothing about marketing, knowing nothing about how to build a business, knowing nothing about any of that stuff. And so I had one client go with me, and that kind of fed the money train for a bit. Then I got a gig associated with another firm working on a case that brought in some regular revenue for a while. But I had a lot more time than I had clients. And so I started just digging into marketing, and it started with me reading Marketing for Lawyers. And Gabe, I don't know, I don't know what it looks like, marketing for financial people, but Marketing for Lawyers books are about the dumbest books out there. And so I threw those out pretty quickly, and then just started reading marketing books and diving into this crazy world called online marketing. I got certified just by going through a program as an inbound marketing specialist by HubSpot, which is a big company that helps people with these things. And I loved it. And so I kind of started going that route, but that was all in furtherance of building my law firm. And that was what I was trying to do. And then enter a life coach. And I was working with a life coach because I was about 40 at the time, not quite, and just kind of in the doldrums and didn't know what was wrong. We talked about relationship. We talked about family. We talked about all that. And after about 6 months of doing that, she then says, well, do you like what you do? And I stammered. And for the first time, I admitted to anyone besides my wife that I really didn't. Now, I love the law. I love researching legal issues. I love the intellectual part, but I spent my day fighting with people all day and not a lot of fun. So I admitted, I said that to her. And then being a life coach, she wouldn't let me wallow. She immediately followed it up with, okay, what are we going to do about that? And she was the one who had the idea. I could see you going on to podcasts and radio shows and giving advice to entrepreneurs about legal stuff. I said, that's an interesting idea. Well, that was sometime in early 2017 is when that happened. And by my next call with her, which was 2 weeks later, I had hired a podcast booking agency and was already getting booked on shows. Now, the funny thing, like for anybody who sees this video, I'm currently sitting here in a black t-shirt. Well, my headshot that we were sending out back then was my lawyer thing, still in a suit and tie and everything and all the formal stuff. So still learning. But that was my entry into the online marketing world. And 2017 was a disaster for me. I probably spent in total over $50,000 in trying to build this online business that year. Did a launch of a course, sold one copy for $627. That woman asked for a refund on day 29 of a 30-day, no questions asked refund policy.
Oh, no.
Yeah, well, oh no, but it's actually a good thing, right? Because if she hadn't, I would have kept pushing forward with that. And what happened was eventually I said, okay, I got to stop this. And so 2018 really changed things, but it was actually something that happened. And I tell everybody, the pivotal moment in my life was New Year's Eve 2017. So December 31st, 2017. Happened to be a Sunday. Family, my in-laws were still in town. Somehow we managed to make it to church, which we never do, or not never, but hardly do when they're in town because we're always running behind. And our pastor was talking about giving. And he was talking about the power of giving and how it changes you. Not about other people, but about how it changes you. And so I decided on the spot to make giving my word of the year for 2018. And I did that. And 2018, I just started giving without expectation, giving value to people, giving stuff away, not like literally giving, my physical products, but giving away my knowledge, my expertise in Facebook groups and communities of entrepreneurs. And it worked. And I made my first sale sometime in April. And by the end of the year, I had made $250,000 in my online business. And so that was kind of the watershed pivotal difference. But at that point, I was selling legal templates. And I like to tell people, if you want to try to sell something that's hard to sell, it's legal templates to online entrepreneurs. Because I have to compete with all the people telling them, hey, I'm going to help you make money. And I'm like, I'm going to help you maybe not get sued. And the good result is nothing happened, right? And so I was doing that. But the advantage was it meant, I guess the advantage, it was hard at the time, but now it's an advantage for me. It meant that I had to dig into things other than the traditional ways that most solopreneurs are marketing, which most solopreneurs are marketing using direct response. They're trying to say, hey, I'm going to ask you to do something and you're going to do it immediately. And I figured out very early that didn't work for legal templates. I just had to build a brand, build a reputation. And so I leaned into that. And that's kind of been the story of my growth. And it has grown my legal template side of my business. But then people wanted me to coach them on how I did that. And so then I kind of created a business and marketing coaching side of the business, which is what I actually love doing. It's still not the most revenue. I still bring more revenue from the legal templates, but the coaching stuff is what I love. I have a great time with, and it gives me a chance to do interesting work. So that's the short version, by the way, of how we got here.
I love that. I think it's awesome. I have to ask something. You said something early on in this, and you said you would have been living someone else's life. What do you mean by that?
Well, so what I have to say, and um, I I have always been a rebellious person. If you look at the Jungian archetypes, I am the classic rebel. I have always been fighting against the status quo. I was in punk rock bands in high school, in college. That's who I was. But then when I went and became a lawyer, I was kind of playing lawyer man. And I try to say it like you would say, like a superhero name, because like, but that's what it felt like. And so it was partly that, but like separately, the problem was like the firm where I had been before I was a prosecutor. Um, they had a reputation for getting great experience, and this is where Neil Gorsuch was my mentor at first, and like he would early on send me down, and I was like the only lawyer from the firm um, at big companies doing internal interviews of witnesses and cases and doing things like that. But the problem was the firm grew, and this often happens with firms that are successful and smaller firms. They got successful, and all of a sudden their cases tended to be hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion cases. And so even after I had been a prosecutor, had been standing up in court, pretty much running my own cases, didn't have much oversight other than, I had to run it by my supervisor to make sure I wasn't doing something dumb and against policy. But beyond that, it was my control. I would have gone back and been like the third person on a case. And that didn't feel right, in addition to the fact that I was going to have to be in a more formal setting and that. And so it was kind of a combination of those things. Plus, my dad ran businesses growing up. And so I think I always had a bit of a entrepreneurial bug and wanted to be in control, not just be a cog in a machine, which is what I felt like I was or would have been if I'd gone back to that firm.
Very interesting. Very interesting. The other thing you said is the pivotal moment of, and there was a couple of them in there, but the pivotal moment of a life coach looking at you saying and asking you the question, do you like what you do?
Yep.
I got to ask, is that life coach still practicing and working with clients?
So I suspect she is, but she actually taught me a very valuable lesson
Mhm.
in marketing without meaning to. She didn't market herself as a life coach. She marketed herself as a relationship coach for professional men who wanted to work on their relationships with their wife or long-term significant other. And kind of what was happening for me and my wife at that time is, look, we were in this period of a 2 and 3 year old daughter where all of a sudden we'd fallen into the role of mom and dad and had kind of lost some of the husband and wife and the relationship stuff. So that's why I went to her. But that was, she figured out how to niche. She was really just a life coach. So she would work with her clients on that and then work with them on like other parts of their relationships with other people, not just their significant others. And then on business, she just helped you with everything, but she knew she had to have that hook. And so that's kind of how she, lured me in. Because if she would have said that she was a life coach, I probably wouldn't have gone to her. No, I shouldn't say I probably wouldn't have. I wouldn't have. But she knew how to find, as a marketer would say, the bleeding neck. What is that symptom that people recognize they have that will bring them into me? And so, I worked with her. I don't know. Starting in 2016. So from 2016 through a good part of 2017, most of 2017, and then I kind of went my own way at that point. But she was a pivotal character, I guess you could say, in my life story.
Yeah, tremendously. Are you comfortable sharing her name? I mean, we can put it in the show notes if somebody wants to reach out to her.
If I could only remember it, that's the
Ah,
sad part. I actually don't remember her name sitting here today. I mean, and it's, I could probably go dig it out from somewhere, but it was, I have kind of moved my brain from that period, so I really don't remember her name, honestly.
yeah, no worries at all. No worries. So, what was the couple of things that you learned in this kind of marketing, going from the really bad marketing books for lawyers to then going down that road of having, all the way up to this, company called Badass Online Marketing, or at least this offering. What were the big things you learned there? And then I think what we'll do is we'll transition into this whole idea of building a brand identity, like we had talked.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the big thing I learned was, and lawyers are, so again, and most professions, this is true. If you have to go to school to get a degree, you're often learning the technical side of the business, but you're just not learning anything about marketing. And lawyers make it even worse because there's this whole professional reputation. And I lived in what you would think of as kind of this white shoe, very prestigious law firm world where marketing is like a bad word. And if you think about it, in the legal world, we literally have disparaging names for lawyers who market. We call them ambulance chasers. We say things like that. And that was my background. And so a lot of the like legal marketing books, what they're telling you to do is like write articles for other lawyers, um, you know, hobnob and schmooze with other lawyers at like the bar association, have a newsletter that, you send out to other lawyers and things like that. And I guess that works in the context of if you serve big companies where the decision makers are other lawyers, right? In-house counsel. But if that's not who you serve, that idea of marketing misses a very big thing, which is you should be talking to your potential clients, not to your peers and competitors. And so that was part of it. Also, I never enjoyed hanging out with and schmoozing with other lawyers. That was not my personality. And so that was never working for me. But, I can't even remember. I worked with some people. I think I bought some courses. I bought some different things from people who helped lawyers market, but it just didn't work. I mean, part of the problem was my particular niche when I was building my firm became patent litigation and largely on the plaintiff side. Well, it's hard to find those people because it's not like, you're building ongoing relationships if you're not helping them file the patents. And long story, to be able to file patent applications with USPTO, you have to have a separate license, which requires you to have an undergraduate degree in a science of some sort or take some classes. Well, I didn't meet the requirements, so I couldn't take that bar. I probably wouldn't have been a great person helping people with that process because it's very detail process oriented, which is not me. But so I finally did find some, got connected with other lawyers who did that, and they became kind of a pipeline for me. But what I kind of discovered along the way in making this transition was that the problem is that most people are way too me focused. And marketing by its nature is not me focused. It's you focused. And this is like an important thing. Like one of the famous quotes that I love is this notion that selling is about the needs of the buyer, or sorry, the needs of the seller to convert a product into money, whereas marketing is about the needs of the customer. It's about figuring out what they need and creating the right market, the right offer, the right product to serve their needs. And that if you do it right, selling becomes superfluous. And that's one of those things that focus really changed. And so, like I say, a lot of people in the kind of serving solopreneur world say they are first entrepreneurs, but they're not because they're still me focused. And that was a big transition I made, is just being focused on what do my people need and how do I serve them and how do I find a solution. And instead of saying, how do I make the most money? I say, how do I serve my clients the best? And what I found is that when I ask that question, I end up making more money. So it's kind of one of those inception level things that I've found over and over again, kind of like with giving and the whole giving as part of my marketing concept. This was something from that life coach, because she taught me that in intimate relationships, oftentimes people give or do nice things to get. They do it as a quid pro quo. It's like, I'm going to do this for you, but that's going to build the expectation that you're going to do this other thing for me. And, at one point that life coach said something to me. She said, do you know your wife's love language? I said, yes. She said, what is it? I said, it's acts of service. She said, okay, what would really make her happy? I said, if I did the dishes, maybe. She said, when's the last time you just did the dishes? I said, I don't know. She said, well, tonight, just go do the damn dishes. And it was this moment where I recognized that getting rid of the transactional feel was key. And so, like, when I talk about giving being my word of the year for 2018, that was the key. I don't expect anything in return. I don't ask for anything in return. And in the markets that I spend my time in, most people are so cynical, they don't believe me at first. They expect that I actually do have an ulterior motive. And it takes a while for them to say, oh no, he's just giving. And so doing that has been the key. And part of it is that I serve people that I enjoy. I enjoy helping them, seeing them succeed. And so all of those things mean I get joy, whether they buy something from me or not, of being able to say, hey, I helped that person build that business over there. And that's pretty cool in my book.
And who are your ideal clients? I mean, who are you serving? Who are you going out and giving away?
So the people that I serve are, I think of them, and there's not a great word, but I call them knowledge brands, or people building knowledge brands. In other words, people building a business based on their know-how and expertise, and largely in the online world. So it's course creators, coaches, membership site owners, people who are kind of doing any of that, whether they're actually serving people directly or trying to package it up as a product. Those are the folks I help. And part of the reason is that ultimately building that kind of business, there's slight differences because you will be a personality driven brand, even if you're not a personal brand. In other words, even if your branding isn't your name, your personality, you as an individual, is an important reason that people are going to do business with you. And so you have to lean into that. And so those are the folks I serve. Now, what I teach would work equally for lawyers, for, anybody building that kind of brand who wants to build an online presence. But I've mainly focused on the folks in this online world. They tend to be people who are, earlier in their journey. They're often people who have tried other things, who've spent thousands upon thousands of dollars on other online courses and programs that didn't work. And then they come to me and find kind of a refreshing thing. One of the more interesting things I've found recently is a lot of my audience are people who had some kind of marketing or business training before and then entered this space and were somehow convinced they had to ignore that stuff because most of what's being taught and called marketing isn't marketing from a traditional sense of the word. And then they hear me talking about what actually sounds more like what they learned, but converted for this space. And it's kind of a breath of fresh air for them. So those are the people who tend to resonate with me the most. But I also say it's not people who just care about the money. It's people who care fundamentally about serving their people. Because I'm not going to, I'm always going to push you to serve your people and figure out a way to serve your people.
Very interesting. Very interesting. So let's transfer over to the building brand equity and why it is so important, and also why most of us solopreneurs are not doing it.
Let me start with, again, if people don't know what brand equity is. Now, it's on a balance sheet, it'll often show up as intangible assets, kind of the goodwill and those things for a big brand. So if you think about something like Coca-Cola, it has brand equity that people buy their products because it's Coca-Cola, right? Or Apple, you buy their products because it's Apple. And for established businesses that intend to be around over the long term, the brand equity is one of their most important assets because it's something that you really can't take away from them. It's uniquely theirs, and it's in some ways immune to competition. And so that's why it's important. It can be your unfair advantage against competition, where people will buy from you because of who you are, because of your brand, even if you charge more. Even if the specs of and again, let's get into the regular product world, even if the specs of your product are identical, again, I buy nothing but Apple products now. I am an Apple person. Now, I don't even think to compare would a Dell, would a Lenovo be better. I just don't do it because I am bought into Apple and who they are. That's the power of brand equity. And you think about that. They captured me the first time back in, 2008, 2009, when I bought an iPhone. I'd never had a Mac computer before that, but slowly but surely, I've converted my wife, my family. We've got iPads, we got Macs, we got all of that in the house. And because they did that work and they acquired me once and delivered great value, since then it hasn't been a problem. So that's kind of the value of brand equity. And the reason why most solopreneurs, I would say, are not doing it is because, and I get this, right? Early on, we want to focus our marketing advertising dollars on things we can measure. In other words, it cost me $3 to get this lead. It cost me $10 to get this lead, whatever your numbers are. And it cost me $50 to acquire a customer. So we want those very kind of measurable things. We want to make sure we get an ROI. And so I get it. And when you're starting out, you should focus on that, right? You should focus on those measurable types of advertising spends. But what I'll tell you is the problem that I hear is from a lot of the people teaching solopreneurs, at least in my audience, what they're teaching them is that that's the only kind of marketing you should do, even for the long term. And we've seen this kind of problems come up from that in the last year, as at least in my space, most of the advertising happens on Facebook, and the Facebook has had some real problems because of Apple's iOS 14 update that makes tracking hard. So all of a sudden, our advertising doesn't work as well. I'm paying 2 and 3 times as much per lead than I used to. Well, people who relied upon that exclusively all of a sudden saw their biggest cost double and triple overnight. And that is a real problem for them. So that's like the traditional route. Now, my business and my legal stuff side, my signature offer is what I call my Online Genius template library. You get access to all my legal templates now and in the future. It's $1,000. So it's, compared to my competitors, it's very cheap, but it's not a cheap, nothing type of expense for most of my customers. When we look at it consistently, somewhere around 70% of the people who purchase that product are not on our list. They didn't come from a funnel. They didn't come from any direct response marketing. They landed on my page and they bought. And I jokingly tell my team it's magic, but it's not. It's brand equity. I have established a reputation. I have established positioning. So when people discover they need legal templates, either they've already heard about me or they ask about me, and I have this army of people out there telling them, go to Bobby Klinck. And so we actually see it in our search analytics that people type Bobby Klinck legal templates, and that brings them to my page and they buy. And so that's what brand equity gets you. And so the big difference is I could turn off all ads today and I'd still be making money. Most people, if they turn off their ads, they stop making money because their lead flow stops. And so that's why I'm saying, long term, if you want a business that's going to be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you should be thinking about, how do I create that brand equity? How do I position myself so that people just know about me? The right people know about me and will buy from me.
$1 million question. How do you do that?
Over time. I mean, that's the thing. It's over time. It's not measurable. Now, what I'll tell you is big brands can measure it. Big brands can do surveys and all these things. We don't have the money to do that, but we simply have to believe that if we create good content, if we put that great content out there consistently, if we engage where our audience is and provide value without, again, that's where the giving things comes in, without expectation, without trying to give that. Again, I was just this morning, I saw someone ask a question about another iOS update that has to do with email marketing. And I was just answering it and providing information that they didn't know, because I also happen to be known as the email guy. That was kind of the first marketing thing that I really got good at. And so I'm answering and providing value to these people. And it was hilarious. I saw people say, well, you are the king of email, so you must be right. And so again, that's an example of me just putting myself out there consistently, providing this value. And so you do it. So, I mean, it's the long process. If you're writing a blog, put some advertising dollars behind getting that out there. Now, traditional digital marketers at big companies would say, hey, however much we spend in time, money, effort to create a piece of content, we should probably spend an equal amount of money, time, effort, advertising and promoting that content. And very few people are doing that. So if you have, Gabe, you and me, podcasts are tougher, right? Because I don't know about you, but I don't tend to go to somebody's website to listen to a podcast. So it's kind of hard to do ads for a podcast. But if you have a blog, something like that, putting that stuff out there and spending some money on that is a worthwhile endeavor. But it's also just being willing to say, you know what, I'm going to carve out 15, 30 minutes a day to go engage with my ideal customer wherever they hang out online and provide value. Not the fake value a lot of people do, but the real value of answering questions, just being useful. And over time, you build that reputation. And I always tell people the best way to do it is focus on a very narrow, like be very narrow up front. Like I did this, like as I was building my business in 2018, like I was doing all of this in, I would say, like groups run by about 3 or 4 different people, but their communities all overlap. So what happened is these people saw me in all these communities and they thought I was just everywhere. I wasn't. I was just everywhere they happened to be. And I was very focused, spent the time there, and it built the reputation.
Interesting. How long did it take to really start to for you to feel that brand equity? I mean, I know that first year you said you had $250,000 in sales, which is amazing.
It was overnight, but because I was very good at it. And what I mean by that is, so the story of that was, I was in this community run by Amy Porterfield, who has, a podcast that's listened to by, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of people. And so I was in her community, and this is where I was providing value. It was like she had been an affiliate for another program. I joined the program through her. So I was giving a ton of value from that. Now I had a lucky break. Back in 2018, this new regulation, it wasn't really new, but it was going into effect, called GDPR, that affected privacy for online marketers, was going into effect in May. And about April, everybody starts freaking out about it. And most lawyers in the world are thinking, aha, opportunity. And so they're selling checklists. And I mean, they're just like trying to gouge people for all this money. Me, I said, you know what? And I went to some trainings to try to figure it out. And I was a lawyer and I couldn't follow their training. So I just printed the law. I reviewed it. I read it. I understood it. And I created a 3-part training and I gave it away for free. And I told Amy Porterfield, like somehow we ended up in a conversation about that. She heard that and she saw me doing this. So she has me on her podcast because she had wanted to do an episode about it. That podcast episode came out April 30th. My list overnight in a matter of weeks went from like 800 to 4,000 because I'd done that. But again, like, could I replicate that? Probably not. But it was because I was doing the right things, and she and her audience she and her team had seen me just giving and bringing this heart of giving. And so they said, hey, I know this person is going to treat people right. And they then were willing to put a link to my free training to her people who sent me that. And I will tell you, some of the people who are in my coaching program now, who are paying me $10,000 a year, are telling me, I first heard you on that podcast. My teammates, some of them first heard me on that podcast. They were entrepreneurs before they decided to come work for me. And so this has been this common theme that, doing that work got me on people's radar. That then, propelled me. And after that, I was on multiple other podcasts talking about GDPR and doing that stuff. And so it just kind of blossomed and mushroomed from there.
Timing. Beautiful timing.
Yeah, that's right. Well, but again, and this is the thing, I think I see that you have good to great behind you. Mm-hmm. So I like to say it's all pure luck. I mean, it was luck for me, but not really. I mean, if you actually look at it, I was doing the work and doing the right stuff. It just worked out because I was willing to do the right work.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. That's fantastic. That's a great story.
Yep.
Anything else regarding building brand equity you'd like to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think people need to understand that you have to understand and be willing to put in the time for a long period of time. Don't expect you're going to start and it's going to work overnight. And I want to be very clear. I'm not saying you don't do the more traditional direct response marketing. I still do direct response marketing. I still have conversion ads where I try to get people to sign up for a freebie, to do all these things. But you want to do both. And over time, especially as a solopreneur, like what I have found, like with solopreneurs, the big thing is they often have, the ones who have early success, depending on their market, a lot of times it's true referrals. It's like their friends and family, or like their friends and family know someone who directly needs their service, right? And so you have that. But the problem is that you need to be building, and that's the best time to be building. If you don't need new clients, great. Keep running some kind of advertising, some kind of marketing to build brand equity at that point, so that it's building up over time. But the biggest mistake, and Gabe, I'm sure you've seen this with a lot of your kind of people you work with. I mean, it's these ebbs and flows. They get a lot of work. And so then they're like, oh, I'm shutting down marketing. all of a sudden the work goes away. Oh crap. I need to get into marketing mode. And like I did that early on as a lawyer. That was my big problem. And this is where you need to recognize this is something that every day it should go on your calendar. I don't know if it's 30 minutes a day or some period of every day should be set aside for marketing. And it can be this brand equity awareness marketing or direct response, but don't ever stop. Because if you stop, that's when you're creating problems. Now you're probably creating problems for a year from now, but you're creating a problem. And so instead, think of it as compound interest. Every single day you do these things and it builds up. And what I can tell people is like a lot of people in my space, at least, like they have a business, their revenue, it looks like a hockey stick. It's kind of just going up a little bit. And then all of a sudden there's this inflection point where it boom. And the reality is that's just a consequence of the compounding effect of what's happening. But the key is you can't quit, especially with brand equity. You got to keep going. And if you quit before you get to that moment, you're going to think it was all a waste, whereas you might have been a month, 2 months, 3 months away from it really kind of having its big effect. So you got to keep doing it and be willing to put in the time, and understand early on it's going to be crickets, and there's going to be haters. There's going to be people who say mean things. That's okay. Just make sure that you're willing to keep doing the work.
Yeah, that's fantastic. That reminds me of a few different books I've read and even some different stories. And the one I'll go with is just the slight edge. The slight edge where just step by step by step. And then the next thing you know, it happens. And so many people stop before they get to that hockey stick. And that's hard. It's too bad.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there's all kinds of analogies or things you can do, and that slight edge is definitely part of it. But it's really just that people underestimate how much they can accomplish in a year or 2 years, but overestimate how much they can do in a day or 2 days. And again, if you're trying to build a business, not a fad, I'm going to suggest you think in 5 and 10-year time horizons. That's how I'm thinking. I'm thinking about, hey, where's my business going to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And keeping that focus, I think, will keep you focused on making sure you're making those long-term investments. Now, again, you got to do the short-term stuff because you got to make sure you have the money coming in to fuel the thing. But if you're not making long-term investments, you will constantly be on that hamster wheel of chasing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm going to use the word money and compound interest to make the transition.
Yep.
This is a podcast about money, and there's 3 questions I ask every one of my guests. And so the first question is what's the smartest thing you've ever done regarding money?
The smartest thing I've ever done regarding money. It's funny because I got way more on the dumb side than the smart side. The smartest thing I would say is, and it's a funny old adage. I bought the cheapest house in a really good neighborhood. So I live in Washington, D.C., in the district itself, in a very nice neighborhood. We bought this house. It literally was the cheapest house that we could find. And it's now worth twice as much, but it's worth twice as much, understanding that anyone who bought it would literally tear it down all in studs, and dig out our basement and start anew. But I was smart enough to build in a good neighborhood, built by a great lot, and made that great decision. And again, that probably was the smartest decision. Now, again, I could also say one of the other smart decisions I made, but pure luck. I was in Washington, D.C., owned a house, sold it in 2007 before moving to Fort Worth, So again, that wasn't really a smart decision. It was a lucky moment in my life. How about that? But I think that's probably the smartest thing I've done. And being intentional about it is the other thing. I mean, making sure that you're thinking about money is the other thing I would say now that I do on a regular basis that makes me smart about it.
That's fantastic. How about the other side? What's the biggest money mistake you've ever made?
Well, I was dumb in my 20s is really the answer. I was in my 20s. I got out of law school with no debt because of blessings from earlier in my life, and got a job at not that clerkship, but once I came to Washington, D.C., I was making $135,000 a year the first year. Then I moved and I was making $180,000 a year as a base salary in the early 2000s with bonuses, etc. The problem was I was spending it faster than I was making it. I was going to Las Vegas all the time, and I loved to gamble. I was going to Atlantic City. I was buying a bunch of nice suits, even though I hated wearing suits. For some reason, I thought I needed like 7 Brooks Brothers suits. And again, the whole compounding interest. I look back now, I'm like, man, if I would have just been smart enough to just put, 10 to 20 grand each year of that away, holy crap. I mean, what could I have now? And it was one of the mistakes I made. And again, it's it's probably the common mistake of youth. But the thing I would tell people is the best time to start saving was 20 years ago. The next best time is today. And I wish I would have done that right earlier in my life.
Yeah, that's a very common 20-plus-year-old mistake. Very common.
Yeah. And again, I'll share another one. Like in my business, the problem I've had is like, oftentimes, and we've solved this largely with help of my team, but I am a natural spender. And so we would have influxes of cash, and all of a sudden it's like, woohoo, let's go buy a bunch of stuff, and sign contracts that are tens of thousands of dollars for different stuff. And then all of a sudden, 2 or 3 months later, it's like, where'd all that money go? And so again, that's been another one of those things that now, we are very intentional about things. We put stuff in my business. We have different accounts for different things, and money gets moved to the right place. And we are, being conscientious about it and budgeting and all that. But that's the other thing, especially for a solopreneur. I think that's a big problem. Oftentimes is if your money is going to ebb and flow, you have to recognize your big months have to cover your low months, and making sure that you're doing that. That's something I wasn't great at initially.
That's a great lesson. Yeah, great lesson. So how about that last question? What does mastering your finances mean to you?
I think ultimately, and I'm not there yet. Let me be clear, but to me, mastering your finances is when you're at a point when you don't really have to think about money. And what I mean by that is it's so just natural for you to do things right that you do think about it, but you never have to worry about it. And I guess that's the point. So, you're intentional about stuff. You look at your budget, like, okay, boop, boop, yep, I got to make some adjustments, done, and then done. But then it's no longer a constraint. It's no longer an issue, and you just understand kind of what to do and how to live within it. And then if you're doing that, you'll be in good shape. Now, again, I think part of that ultimately means that you've built your business up to the point that you're making enough money to cover your costs, to cover your business's costs and things like that. But ultimately it's about getting to that point of, I think of it as financial freedom, but financial freedom is different for everybody. I have people I work with who, their real goal is to take home about $50,000 a year and live on a farm. Cool, right? That's their goal. Let's get them there. Me, I'm living in Washington, D.C. with a high cost of living where, I'm used to living or was used to living on multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars in salary. So my expectations are higher. You just need to know what you need and have a plan to get there. And to me, mastery comes when it just becomes second nature, I guess. And you don't really have to think about it much because you naturally think about it, I guess, is it becomes that ingrained habit.
That's fantastic. I really like that. Thank you. So how can my listeners find you? There's going to be 1 or 2 people who are going to raise their hand. They're like, hey, I'd really like Bobby to help me. How can they find you?
So the best place is just go to BobbyKlinck.com, and that's Klinck. So BobbyKlinck.com. You'll find all my stuff there. Again, you'll find a brand that's very clearly me. It's very rebellious. It's, not, doesn't look anything like a lawyer. So just be ready for that. But that's where, from there, you can find all my free offers. I've got a free privacy policy. If you got a website and you need that, I've got one of my most audacious acts of giving. We started about a year ago as we're recording this. In December of 2020, we launched something called Bomb You, Badass Online Marketing University. And we believe, this is me looking 5 and 10 years in the future. I believe that the era of making a bunch of money off of online courses will go by the wayside, because I don't think information in itself can be sold for high value. So we decided we're just going to create all the trainings that we think entrepreneurs need, and we're still doing it. We're still building them out and give it away for free. So we give people access to those things. And I've had a lot of people say that each one of those courses is better than ones that they've spent hundreds or thousands of dollars on. And so if you kind of want to figure out this marketing stuff from my perspective, you can find out how to get into Bomb You on my website too.
That's fantastic. Anything else you'd like to share?
That's it. I mean, again, like once people get in my world of that, if they want to work with me, if they want to, kind of figure out like how they can pay me, there's lots of ways you can do that. I got legal templates for sale if that's what you need, or I've got a membership and a coaching program on the marketing side. But I always recommend start with the free stuff. Make sure you like me before you buy something from me. And I'm pretty sure you will. And if you don't, great. Feel free to reach out, tell me why, and I might be able to send you to someone else who's more your speed. And I don't take it personally. I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea, but I always say start with my free stuff and then we can go from there.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Bobby, for being on the Solopreneur Money Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Gabe. It's been a great conversation.
Well, Solopreneurs, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Thank you once again to Bobby Klinck of BobbyKlinck.com. My 3 takeaways are: 1, the power of giving. Focus on giving when you're out there in your marketing and serving first, as he had said a few times. Number 2, the power of patience when it comes to building your brand equity, and the power of persistence, which all comes down to focusing on the long view. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you have not had a chance to get your copy of the Solopreneurs Money Manifesto, go to Amazon or solopreneurmoney.com. Thanks again for listening and have a fantastic day.